Welcome to, I hope you can all hear me. Welcome to Leading Communities and Economy, a story Coirsteach as the economy. It's my very great pleasure to host this event. My name is James Fraser. I joined UHIMI in 2002. And I was the last principal of UHIMI and the first principal and vice chancellor of the University of the Highlands and Islands. So it's a very great pleasure for me and a great honour to be asked to kickstart this series. I'm joined today by a stellar panel. I think that was a stellar video we watched. First of all, let me introduce Professor Todd Walker. Todd has just been appointed as the third principal of the university. Todd's an expert, he's also an expert too. He's an expert in biotechnology, and he's got a PhD in molecular oncology. He's an experienced academic manager, and I'm told that he's experienced in running complex university organizations. So we know why he was appointed to the University of the Highlands and Islands. Welcome, Todd. Todd will be joined by Lydia. Lydia Romer is principal of West Highland College, UHI. Lydia was educated in Munich, Glasgow, and Oxford. She's a lot of experience in teaching and managing tertiary institutions. And of course, she has that invaluable perspective of the university from our partners. I'm also happy to welcome Flo. Flo Janssen moved from Hamburg to Stornoway, took a degree at Lewis College, UHI, and she was appointed or elected as the UHISA president in March 20. Now, I don't see James on my screen, but he may be there all the same. And on the assumption that you're there, James, you are also welcome. James is a graduate of UHI with a rather exciting degree in a master's degree in island studies. And he's put that to great use by founding an organization called Island Innovation, which advises on how you can apply technology to make islands great places to live in and to make them have sustainable economies. I'm also happy to welcome Charlotte Wright. Charlotte is head of HIE, Highland and Island Enterprise, and Charlotte's background is in strategic planning and change management, and of course HIE is and was a critical partner in this enterprise. And finally, behind the scenes is Jill. Jill's the boss, and we all entirely depend on Jill for the delivery of today's event. So welcome, panelists. After I've spoken, Todd will speak, and then we'll have a session with the panel. Let me start with a little snapshot of the history of the university. The first attempt was in the 17th century by Sir Thomas Achard of the University of Cromarty. He was a landowner in Cromarty, and he wanted a university in Cromarty. Cromarty was a very important place then. I'll not read you out the quote, perhaps you can see it yourselves, but it was very like UHI, his vision. It was to be innovative, it was to have the arts, it was to give economic benefit, and I think he was joining FE with HE as well, because he refers there to applied knowledge. So well done, Sir Thomas. It's a pity you didn't deliver. So we'll move on to the end of the last century. And there was then a real move to get a university. And I will say a little about the why, the how, and the what. So we'll move on. And I'm going to give you just a little framework to hang this on. The first phase was at the end of the last century, and that was a project phase when the project was kick-started again. That led to an institution which was called the UHI Millennium Institute. And the UHI Millennium Institute was charged with transforming itself into a university of the Highlands and Islands. And that happened in 2011, the Institute in 2001 or so. So moving on. There was something in the air then that kick-started and helped to kick-start the university. There was an attempt in the 60s when new universities were being built in the UK, and as a result of the Robbins report, there was an attempt to get a university in Inverness. And Inverness was absolutely put to the post by Stirling. Stirling got the university, Inverness failed, and there was a huge sense of injustice left around that. Because, as you know, Stirling is near Glasgow, near Edinburgh, near Dundee, near St Andrews. The place was full of universities, and there was nothing in this vast region. Then there was the HIDB, that's the predecessor to HI, was founded mid-60s. Can you go back, Jill? Was founded mid-60s, and it was charged with developing the economy. And one of the big problems they had to face was, how do you stop people leaving this region, and how do you stop young people leaving this region? And people thought university might help. So there's a huge demographic push. This was also an era of cultural confidence. Perhaps the Gaelic movement, perhaps Sean Morostig and Skye, all these things were coming together, and people were saying, why do we not have a university, but we supply most of the symbols by which Scotland's known, and people are incredibly interested in what's in our region. There was also an ambitious tertiary sector. There were other institutions in the region. There were FE colleges, there were research institutes, and they wanted degrees. And people thought great economies must have great universities in their midst. Next, please. There were also people and forces are important. First of all, Sir Robert Cowan was chairman of the Highlands and Islands Development Board. He was mad keen on the university. He diverted economic resources to the university, and he gives somebody a full-time job in his organisation of helping develop it. Highland Council had a similar desire to get a university, and they set up a steering group under a councillor, Val McKeever, and that steering group also included Sir Robert, and together they became a driver for the university. They asked a retired university principal from South Clyde, Sir Graham Hills, if he would go around the Highlands and Islands and figure out what kind of university could be delivered. Graham, who was always good at getting publicity, saw an opportunity in 1992 to publicise his plan at a star event in Sormorostig and Skye. Next, please. So the forces and the people came together. Funding, somebody had the bright idea of getting a load of funding from the Millennium Commission that could be invested in capital facilities throughout the region. The civil servants were against it and lukewarm. The rest of the university establishment weren't all that interested. They weren't openly hostile, but they weren't openly helpful, especially the University Grants Committee. However, there was a slightly maverick Secretary of State for Scotland at the time who knew his own mind, and he didn't pay too much attention to civil servants when he thought they were wrong. He came up to Inverness with the Scottish Grand Committee, which used to parade around the UK, around Scotland, and he announced, to the consternation of his civil servants in the audience, that the government was committed to developing a university in the Highlands and Islands, and that gave it huge political punch. Meantime, the people who were trying to get the project together had another bright idea. Let's get somebody from a university to try and deliver it. So they got another retired university principal, an engineer from Heriot-Watt, Sir Alistair McFarlane, and he came and ran it for 1 year. Next, please. And Sir Alistair did one amazing thing. He persuaded the establishment to recognise it as an institution and to fund it in the same way as other universities and higher education institutions. Then there was, what kind of universities should be delivered? There was a big argument about that. There wasn't too much argument about having a university in Inverness. That was felt to be inadequate because it didn't address what was happening in the areas outside Inverness, particularly in the islands. So that was rejected quite early. And that was what had failed in the mid-60s. Then there were some partners who thought, why can we not carry on delivering degrees from other universities? That was also rejected as a kind of colonial model that would never lead to the development of a university of the region. And Graham came up with the thing that was ultimately delivered, sometimes called a university of the digital age, but a new type of university for a new millennium. Next, please. And what Graham argued was, and this had huge support throughout the region, that the university should be grounded in the partners who were already delivering education and research in the region, that it should be distributed, that there would be staff everywhere, students everywhere, and right across these campuses, degrees would be delivered both within the campuses and from all the others. And there were various ways of describing this. Blended learning used to be how it was described when I was principal. And the idea was that you got some of your stuff face-to-face, some of it came through interactive video conferencing, and some of it might even come through distance learning. But the mix allowed you to maximize the presentation of degrees right across the geography of the region. And it linked the university with the further education provision that was within the region. And this was seen as a great advantage because it allowed people enormous opportunities for progressing through further and higher education. And next, please. How was it delivered? Well, very quickly, there was an intensification of university, people from universities to try and strengthen the university infrastructure. Robert Cormack came from Queen's University. I came from the University of Paisley, which was a new university. And both of us, when he was principal and when I became principal, strengthened the provision of deans and registry and faculties and all these things that were there to spread a university culture. The civil servants were still pretty lukewarm, but we had a repeat political thrust from Ian Gray, who was the first Labour Minister for Lifelong Learning in the Devolved Government in 2002. He came up to the Highlands and he instructed the Chief Executive of the Funding Council to set up a working party with UHIMI and the Quality Assurance Agency to help deliver a university. Next, please. And that was delivered in the next few years. To get a university, you had to have a certain number of students, you had to have a certain spread of subjects, and you had to show yourself capable of managing your teaching and research. That was done before 2011. An application was made, and in 2011, UHIMI got university title. It was a titanic struggle and involved enormous change throughout the partnership. People were fired with enthusiasm to win this thing. That kept everybody together, kept everybody focused, and the rest is history and some of its future, and you're coming to that in a minute. And my final slide is of the installation of Her Royal Highness Princess Anne as the Chancellor. And there we are progressing from the installation of the Chancellor back to the university headquarters in Ness Bank. There's a very quick run through history. I'm now going to turn it over to Todd. Todd is going to make history. I've only talked about what happened in history. So over to you, Todd.
Thank you, James. Nothing like an intro just like that. I really appreciate it. Look, it's an honour to be on the stage with yourself. Can I also acknowledge my fellow panellists today? And can I thank each and every one of you for finding time in your day to come and listen and to celebrate our 10-year celebration of the University of Highlands and Islands. I also want to extend my sincere thanks for the warm welcome that's been extended to me over the last 2 months. Tomorrow is my 2-month anniversary. I've been here in post for 2 months. It feels a lot longer, but it has been a warm and genuine welcome. Today, I want to take you through just a half a dozen slides in some of the thoughts that we've gathered together in the period between my appointment and my predecessors, and the work that's gone into place in terms of determining what the future may look like. And I'd like to take you through those today. So as we've just heard, it's as that history that we've just heard from James, you can divide the 10 years and preceding that up into 3 chapters. And the first chapter for us, as we've just heard, was really a period of establishment for the university, and an establishment around both the Millennium Institute, getting a title, and having Professor James Fraser becoming our first principal and vice chancellor, and as we've just heard, Her Royal Highness Princess Royal becoming our first Chancellor, are still deeply engaged Chancellor with the running and the functions of the university. Our second chapter was more about growth and development. It was becoming a regional strategic body for further education across the Highlands and Islands, and it was also a period in which we developed and deepened our research profile, and we had and still have a number of areas which are world leading. And to that effect, we gained powers to award our own research degrees. And as you saw in the opening video, we grew our presence internationally and continued to do so. We sit now at the precipice of the 3rd chapter, and what that 3rd chapter looks like depends on the way in which we all engage, read the landscape, and harness the energy of the institution, so that when we go forward, we actually start to develop that 3rd chapter. We have some things in our favour, such as a new strategic plan to be refreshed, and I'll talk about that today. But we also have to be very conscious of the fact that we're operating in an intensely competitive and dynamic education and research environment. And of course, all of us, not just us in Scotland, but all of us globally, are faced an uncertain future with COVID. Thinking that COVID is going to go away is probably premature at this point. There is still a significant amount of uncertainty that sits around that. So we sit now at the precipice of the 3rd chapter. I've said publicly on a number of occasions, and indeed through the recruitment process, that as a university, our aspiration should build upon one of our stellar strengths, which is our place-based education that we have in the regions and the communities, but should increase and embrace a daring to be different ethos. We enjoy the fact that we are a different institution, but daring to be different is something that harnesses not only the courage that we have going forward, but also allows us to explore new elements and new themes. So embracing the achievements of the past, this ethos needs to harness that energy and the new ambitions that we need to set for areas of strength that we have. And each of these will lay the foundations of the 3rd chapter of what can only be described as a remarkable university. Our last strategic plan was designed for that 2nd chapter, for the growth and the development, and it was applicable for the time, and it achieved that very mission. But all of us would agree that the landscape has changed since 2015. Just to mention a few: Brexit, COVID-19, funding reviews, an election, and of course lockdown. These are external factors for which we have very limited control, but as an institution need to be able to adapt. I'd like to reflect just a little bit on the sector, having come from Australia to the UK and particularly to the Scottish landscape. I just want to reflect a little bit on the nature of universities and how they are adapting or continue to need to adapt to this increasing external pressures. We hold the view, and I think it is widely held across globally at the moment, that the golden age of universities in the developing world is passing, and that life is about to get a whole lot tougher. The rising costs of running a university are no longer matched by a willingness of governments and students to pay for them. and that traditional operating models of a university cannot produce sufficient productivity gains to cover that gap. All universities, not just the University of Highlands and Islands, but all universities are approaching a crossroads. And all universities must decide whether they transform themselves into a new kind of entity or agree that the entity that they currently have is sufficient and optimise their current structures. I hold the view that UHI needs to focus on at least 4 things: our strategy, our capability, our operating model, and our technology. The result of keeping these firmly in our sights will be that we become a connected university, deeply connected with our communities, deeply connected with our research, deeply connected with our students and our curriculum, able to keep delivering the extraordinary benefits that a tertiary education and research can provide for its communities. Indeed, shaping the future post-COVID in this new environment is what should become our new social contract. All universities have existed in place and time, and many universities have been in existence for thousands of years. They are indeed places that make sense of the world and shape the world. It would be a mistake to see universities as static and unchanging. They are not. Indeed, during major economic pressures, universities have remade themselves and reformed themselves to accommodate those changes. The uncertainties that we find ourselves in this current environment post-COVID is difficult for everyone: government, society, communities, and universities. We hold the view that there is no better time to renew a discussion between government, university, and community to help reshape and think about the way in which we can reinvigorate the economic drivers that we will need as we come out of the post-COVID recovery. So this new concept has been around for many years, but the idea that we refresh it in the context of post-COVID is something that I think we can refer to as the new social contract. We have a moral obligation to be able to drive these things and drive them for the sustainability and the capability of our communities. So as we approach the start of the 3rd chapter, we're faced with the promise of this being our pivot moment. And you can see on the graph on the right-hand side that institutions from whatever sector who feel that their strategic ambition is low and that they only want to improve their relative performance tackle their next strategic mission in and around optimization. That is not the place that UHI finds itself in. It has a higher strategic ambition, a higher value proposition, and will need to think about itself in terms of remodeling its business model for the future. Equally, that means that a higher degree of transformation results in a higher degree of disruption. And it's that disruption that holds the promise for the future of this institution. So over the last 18 months, and particularly towards the end of last year, my predecessor and colleagues have been working on reshaping our new strategic plan. And to that effect, I can announce that at the last court meeting, the new strategic framework, in terms of it being a draft, was endorsed. And I'm going to take you through that framework today. And it's out for 2 months consultation before it goes back to court for some discussion in relation to what our new strategic mission should look like. The framework is built around 3 things: an ambition to be different, a vision for the future, the 3rd chapter, and pillars which are new but very familiar to us: tertiary education, research impact, enterprise, and engagement. So a good plan is a plan on a page, and this is the framework on 1 page. A daring to be different ethos, which defines both our mission, which has remained the same since the beginning of UHI, to be transformational, to have rather a transformational impact on the prospects of our region, its economy, its people, and its communities. But our vision has changed in that we wish to become a more connected, streamlined, and sustainable university. Our brand story and core values remain unchanged. They hold us in good stead for the future. But the strategic pillars under which we need to now start to seek greater ambition have changed. Tertiary education, a connected curriculum built on personalising the learner journey with more content to more people through more channels. Deepening and enhancing our research impact, ensuring that it continues to be internationally ranked, industry-linked and world-leading. To take a more entrepreneurial spirit, embracing that, but also delivering a strong economic and commercial growth for the institution and partnership as a whole, resulting in socially responsible and well-managed enterprise. And finally, a pillar that is structured around engagement. One of the things for which we are known across the Highlands and Islands, and in fact across the landscape of tertiary education in Scotland, we want to ensure that we are a connected organisation that pursues engagement with the people and the communities in which we work, always striving for mutual benefit. Now, it's those 4 pillars which are effectively going to be the drivers for this institution over the next 5 years. So if you kept in mind the previous strategic plan, and many of you would be aware of that, what has effectively been the key elements of this new draft and this new framework? Firstly, daring to be different sets a tone of uniqueness and individuality. To become connected and streamlined and sustainable is a very simple way of saying that we want to remodel ourselves and transform ourselves into an organisation that is fit for purpose for the future and has the flexibility and adaptability to withstand those external factors that I spoke about before, and to embrace 4 new but very familiar pillars of tertiary education, research impact, enterprise and engagement. Lastly, we need to think about what UHI will look like when we celebrate our 20th anniversary. And there's no better example than a graduating student celebrating receiving their testimony at a graduation. It reminds us of why we're here, and to celebrate not only the achievements of our students, but also the achievements through our students when they see it with their families in the communities, because many of our students remain in those communities and drive those economic regions. Harnessing our power of place, we can position ourselves as a leading modern university that drives those regional economies, its growth and prosperity through positive social change and impact. And that's what, if anything, we need to be setting as an ambition for ourselves, is being able to drive the regional economies, increase our position as a leading modern university, and set the footprint for the 3rd chapter of this institution. Thank you very much.
We move now into our panel discussion, and if there are questions which have been passed in, they'll be passed, I think, to me, and I will field them to Todd and to others accordingly. Now, Jill, do you have any questions?
No, we're going to throw it open to the panel for the moment to discuss.
Okay. So, a panel comments, reactions, thoughts to what you've just heard.
And can I just come in, James? Is that okay?
Yes, please do,
Yep.
Lydia.
It's Charlotte from Highlands and Islands Enterprise.
Sorry.
And can I just say what an honour it is to be part of the 10th anniversary celebrations of the University of the Highlands and Islands. So I'm really delighted to be here. And why has Highlands and Islands Enterprise, the economic development agency for this part of Scotland, been so supportive and concerned in the development of the university? And because it is so important to the economy of our region, to the future of our young people, to giving us equity, to giving us choice. And actually the story that we've just heard, I think, really underpins some of the characteristics that are so important to us about the way we work as partners across the public sector and other agencies, and the importance of our geography and our place-based approach and making sure that all parts of the region benefit from investment and development. So I think UHI absolutely embodies what is important and what our values are as people who live, work, study and enjoy being part of the Highlands and Islands.
Thank you, Charlotte. Anyone else coming in?
James, it's Lydia here, if I may.
Yeah, please do, Lydia.
Thank you very much for both your and Todd's reflections, both on our distance travelled and our origins and our future. I'm privileged to be here as part of this panel as a principal of one of the academic partners of this university. And West Highland College shares a 10-year anniversary with UHI. West Highland College as a partner was very much created in the spirit of what this university is achieving for this region, delivering sustainable access to post-school tertiary education, and working with individuals, with businesses in order to create resilient communities that flourish. My part of the world, West Highland College, started from very, very small beginnings, and was very much through the partnership working with the university, bringing the benefits of the regional working into areas that are very sparsely populated and that had, previous to our 10-year history, no sustainable access to learning, teaching, work-based learning, training, research and innovation activities that were accessible. So many young people had to leave after school in order to find university education or work-based training, and as a result, the areas were considered very fragile. So the benefit of UHI, I think, lies in the strength of its partners that deliver at a local level, not just what they can do by themselves, but how they can also connect with each other in order to deliver the partnership benefits of all of UHI into every part of the region. Looking forward, I think there is a bright future for UHI as we gain confidence. I see that in our students and particularly our student association that's also represented here, but I also see it in our staff, who are really our biggest asset right throughout UHI, who are gaining in confidence both in teaching and pedagogy. That covers all of the tertiary spectrum, but also in gaining the confidence and creating really impactful research and innovation that benefits the region, and who are really driving us to think differently. Todd's theme of connecting the university in all parts and connecting not just locally, regionally, but nationally and internationally, I think is very much what will underpin our future. And the university has been really innovative and ahead of its time in how it's used digital technologies to do that. And I think the university can be a real leader in that field going forward. And I'm very proud and privileged to be part of it.
Thank you, Lydia. Do you want to get a student perspective, Flo?
Yeah, I was just about to ask to come in. I think what the university offers is actually very unique to our students. They cannot just move from basically having no qualification, having left school early, into the system of UHI and possibly leave with a PhD if that's as far as they want to go, or drop out at any stage with a qualification that we want. So that is a fantastic opportunity. But I also think there's just something about the relationship to the staff that is very unique for students. They're not just a big number within a big email folder like it is in other universities that we see, maybe more usual traditional setup universities. So we really get that relationship and close working relationship with the lecturers, and it really feels like the university staff and the university itself really cares about you as a student and the success that you have, and also about the pathways that you're building for yourself in the future. And just having the opportunity to come into such a supportive environment where no matter your background, you will be supported, I think is very incredible as well within that. And definitely a huge kudos to the university as well.
Thank you very much, Flo. I don't know if James is still with us.
I'm here, yes. I was just going to jump in on that. Thank you, James, and thank you to everyone for organizing this. Likewise, as the other panelists had said, I'm delighted to be here for UHI's 10-year anniversary. And as a former student, obviously have been slightly more distant from the university in the last year or two, not involved in all the trials and tribulations that you've had over the last 12 months or so. But knowing how well prepared the university was for this situation, I and kind of watching from a distance and keeping updated, I can see, I guess, how forward thinking the university was, and hope to see that innovation is continuing. For me, working very internationally, I think there's a really exciting opportunity for UHI, showing what I think is really the future of education and being ahead of the game there. And even the course that I was taking was one of the courses, the Island Studies course, that particularly relied on this. We had pretty much a different speaker from a different country joining in every week, and I think that's exactly how this situation should be. So definitely a quick shout out to the Island Studies program and Andrew Jennings in Shetland for all the work that he's done for that. Just quickly, I think there's going to be more opportunities this year. We talked about the COP26 and the climate change conference happening in Scotland, and all these other kind of major events as we go back to whatever the new normal looks like. So I think there'll be a lot more opportunities for UHI over the next year.
Thank you very much, James. Can I also say how really inspiring the new strategic plan is and the vision? It's interesting that the acronym TREE comes out of the vision, and maybe that was deliberate, but it's a really good metaphor for what's planned. You always think of trees as things that grow and flourish. I just want to briefly just tell a little story. I am the third generation in my family to have gone away from the Highlands and Islands to university. And my children had to go away to university except my youngest. And my mother's aunt went to Glasgow before the First World War. And my mother went to Glasgow in between the wars. And my children went to Glasgow, Edinburgh, in more recent times. But my youngest child went to Highland Theological College in UHI, where she was able to study history and lots of other things. And because she had some special circumstances to do with her health, UHI was perfect. She could choose when to have face-to-face, when to have video. She can choose when to simply read text. This is the kind of thing that makes UHI an inspiring place. And then if you add great research, great innovation, and help to people in creating great economies and communities to that teaching, what an organization you have in UHI. What a jewel, what a prize. Isn't Todd the luckiest man in the world to be responsible for ushering this in? So we'll all wish him incredible good luck in doing so. Now, does anybody want to come in with any final comment or observation from the panel before we have a look at some of the questions that we've received? Okay, let me just have a quick look at some of the questions. The first question is a really interesting question. What does the panel think learning will look like in 10 years' time? Who wants to take that interesting one up? Flo.
I will start off on this one, but I'm sure everyone will have their own perspective on this. But I think learning will look probably a lot different. We will already see now with coming towards post-pandemic, I guess, that how attitudes have shifted to education. I think we'll see a lot more remote learning. I think the need to kind of move away and having that big city experience might have also kind of disappeared a little bit with the experience of the last year. I think the university has absolutely responded perfectly to the pandemic, and with everything we had on offer with blended learning so far, we had a lot of experience to rely on. So I think we move into that. I think we might see a lot of returns to learning as well with the changes in labour market that we might see coming up over the next couple of years. So maybe some more mature students coming back and taking us up on offers. But I also could imagine seeing moving into more short courses and kind of micro credentials and stuff like that for students as well, to kind of really get into the upskilling of our communities as well, and kind of move into that direction with learning moving forward. But definitely more digitalized, more remote learning. I mean, we're already talking about flexi time and work, then we actually need to come in. I think it really has moved away from this idea that we need to be at a center. I think we see university buildings transforming into something completely new. I think we will see them more as learning hubs rather than places you have to go to be attending your lecture. I think it will be a lot more open, a lot more collaborative, and I think we will see a lot more exchange across the network, not just within UHI, but also on a national basis within learning communities.
Thank you very much, Flo. Charlotte.
But following that, that was a great vision from Flo. I think we'll see universities and learning much more close to business and the fast-paced moving demands of economy and business and the workplace. And I guess to do that as well, that greater emphasis on learning being responsive and adaptive in a much quicker way than maybe we have done over the previous decades or even centuries, because the demand for skills, the pace of technology, all of those are moving at such a fast pace that the traditional models are going to change. And certainly, my perspective is economic here, but I think that much closer alignment to the workplace and to business will really drive dividends for the universities that want to continue to be relevant and meaningful, and actually, I guess, value for money to both the student and to the public sector.
Thank you very much. Lydia and then Todd.
Yeah, I would echo what previous speakers have said. I think there will be great transformation following the pandemic in terms of learning design, in terms of what we do with our learning spaces. And we will, I think, significantly increase the reach of our learning to more people, but perhaps not in the current form of our more traditional full-time curriculum, but much more bite-sized or micro-credentialed curriculum that is available as and when needed, and with probably 24/7 access that delivers very personalized learning needs to individuals of all ages. I think, though, place will continue to have a very, very important role to play, because I think it would be easy to fall into the trap to think that it's all about technology, but it will not be all about technology. Technology is merely a vehicle to deliver full access, but it will be, place will be very important. And I think, as Flo has said, the role of our learning spaces will have to be fundamentally rethought, and they will become places where we collaborate, innovate, and engage with our communities and our businesses in a different way. And technology will be merely the foil through which we increase our access and our reach.
Thank you, Lydia. Todd, I think you're wanting to come in.
Just quickly, James, I think in the last few years there's been a focus on opinion. I think that's going to switch now to a greater focus on truth rather than opinion. So there'll be no better place for that than colleges and universities. I think on a more practical level, both in terms of learning and in terms of teaching, the curriculum and our pedagogy will be refreshed continually. We'll probably move more to authentic assessment. The idea of having grades will probably be an anathema. We'll probably switch to being competent or non-competent in various things. And I think you'd be very brave to try and predict what kind of technologies will be around in 2030.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to come in on this, or shall I move on?
Well, just quickly, I'd like to pick up on what Lydia had said about the the importance of place. I think we're all a bit fed up of Zoom. They call it Zoom fatigue, or in this case, WebEx. But at the same time, it's a huge opportunity to be able to connect with people. I mean, I'm currently in Portugal, so it would have been more difficult for me to have attended this in person. And I think over the next year or two, we're going to find a happy medium where we take advantage of all of these technical opportunities to exchange with people on the other side of the globe, and even just within the Highlands and Islands, you know, between different, some of the more remote parts of the region, but then find a balance to the in-person experience. I mean, clearly today's event would be a very different experience if we were all together in the room, and in certain ways would have allowed us to have those smaller in-person conversations. So that's what I'm excited to see, how UHI tackles that in finding the best of both worlds, and I think is an opportunity to be, again, really at the forefront of how education is delivered.
Thank you very much. It is interesting, something we're discovering with Zoom, how it's not as well adapted as face-to-face, I think, for innovative, creative, inventive thinking. And you hear people worrying when people say, oh, we'll never go back to offices again, how you do that if you actually don't bump into people. We've got on the chat a lot of interest in the focus on transformation and on community engagement and entrepreneurship. And a question arises that's been posted out of that is, large organizations have difficulty in moving to accepting losses and failures. And this plan will inevitably have a lot of risks. How will UHI deal with these risks? What a question. Who wants to take that one? Todd?
Well, I'm happy to take, there's about 5 questions embedded in that one question. So how we deal with risk is probably the same we've always dealt with risk, and we modify and adapt the way in which we assess, mitigate and treat risk. And all institutions, not just ours, have got sophisticated ways of measuring it. But what sits behind that question is risk appetite, and whether or not this place as an institution has the appetite to take some risks. If you are not failing, you are not moving forward. It's as simple as that. You're standing still. And so you've got to say to yourself at some point that we are going to try some things and they are not going to work. That is not a failure. That is just the fact that it hasn't worked. That's not going to stop us from continuing to try different things. If I can use a very simple analogy, it's like fishing. You can have 3 lines in the stream and only one of them catches a fish at a particular time. You don't give up on fishing. And this is exactly the same when we're going to try and innovate the institution, think about my curriculum, think about our assessment, think about our research. Not everything's going to work, but we're not going to beat ourselves up about it. We're going to actually dust ourselves off and keep on moving forward.
Hallelujah to that. Anybody else want to say anything on that one? Charlotte?
I maybe just focus in on the reference to innovation, and I've actually just come out of a strategy session with all of the Scotland's skills and economic development agencies, and when we compare ourselves to other OECD countries, our ranking as a nation in terms of innovation is perilously low. So, you know, maybe they're counting the wrong thing. I'm certainly open to that. But I think there probably is a challenge to us as a nation in how we develop our economy and its link to university and learning, about how we fully embrace innovation. And I think what's implicit in the question is actually our cultural approach to accepting failure as part of success. And if I dare mention another university, but we did some work with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The culture there is completely different. Start a new business, fail, great. That's actually a good point chalked up in terms of your ability to go on as an entrepreneur and do something again and again and again. And actually, I think we just have to embrace that. Try something, fail fast, learn from that, move on, both within education and skills and business and economy.
Thank you very much. Anybody want to come in, or will we move on? In that case, I'll move on to another question. This question is UHI a private or a public university? Sorry, is the University of the Highlands and Islands a private or a public university?
Well, James, technically it's a public institution, but all institutions are having to find ways of diversifying their revenue, and will engage at different times in private activities to do such a thing. But technically the institution is a public institution.
Okay. Another question is, UHI prided itself on being unique in its learning style and its teaching style, but now the others are copying us, and COVID has given them a jolt in the arm. How will the University of the Highlands and Islands differentiate itself from the others now that they're catching up? Lydia.
Again, I'm happy.
Sorry.
Lydia.
Lydia.
I don't think other universities have the ability to copy us. I think there is perhaps from the experience of the pandemic, sort of the conclusion nearby to think that just by adopting digital learning more universally, that would be the same as UHI. I think UHI is uniquely tertiary, and as yet there is really no sign, certainly within Scotland or elsewhere, that any similar kind of vision has been embraced under the umbrella of a university. So I think it will be some time before others may follow or wish to follow there. I think the way how we are distributed across such a large region, and the way how we connect our learners, our communities and our partners is something that is a million miles away from a big city centre kind of university with a massive single campus. So I think the way how we actually are in our region and are connecting is much more aligned with sort of future concepts like 20-minute neighborhoods, for instance, where we have access to a unique tertiary university and all that its might brings, but distributed in a very unique way across a region that covers half of Scotland, its most remote parts and all of its islands. So I don't think there's any risk of us being replicated elsewhere. I don't think that's possible.
Thank you. I think you're wanting to come into this too.
Just going to make the comment, I totally agree with what Lydia said. I just want to make the comment that there are some universities in Scotland that are waiting for COVID to finish so that they can switch back to face-to-face teaching and bring their students back on campus. There are some universities that have suddenly realised that there's another way of delivering their education, but in and around that they're not that well prepared either with the technology or the pedagogy or the way in which they do their assessments. That means for us, we can't be lax. We need to continue to focus on our technology. We need to invest in those spaces and our professional development and education. We also need to continue to enhance our scholarship of learning and teaching. Our unique, selling proposition, our USP, is the thing that both James and Flo talked about, is the personalisation and the connectedness that students have with us, whether they're studying locally at a college in their communities or whether they're studying, online broadly across the region. It's that connectivity which gives us a strength going post-COVID.
Thank you. Flo, are you coming in? And then James, I think, is wanting to come in. Flo.
Yeah, I just wanted to go on the back of that as well. I mean, we do have over 15 years of experience of creating this online environment. So I think that really gives us a head start in comparison to other universities as well, which we can't forget about. I think we're offering such a different, unique experience with our geographical position that we are in for students, but also how the connectiveness works right now, that I don't think that will change anytime soon. I think what we need to keep doing is innovate the ways that we teach. And I think we do that every single year. We're trying new aspects, we're upgrading our software. So I think it's keeping on the ball of that and creating innovative online spaces, and also reinventing how we're using our campuses and connecting students that way, and connecting students across the whole network. So you really have the opportunity to do I don't know, a network basically across all of Scotland. I mean, we're teaching from Shetland all the way down to Perth. We've got a learning centre with HTC in Glasgow and Paisley. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for students to take advantage of and really also move into a post-study environment with. I mean, who can say that they have contacts across all of Scotland moving into your first graduate job? And I think that is something that we need to take more advantage of, if not even a national network by the time you're leaving.
Thank you, Flo. James?
I completely agree with everything that's been said. I think one of the important things when people are, especially right now, when so many people are sitting at home with little social contact, is this idea of community. And what was interesting in my experience as a student was studying for 2 years and not meeting the majority of my classmates until graduation, but yet still feeling a part of a community. And I don't think many of the universities that have been forced to deliver their services digitally have really embraced that, because, as someone previously mentioned, they're desperate to go back to normal as quickly as possible. And so still feeling like you're in a community and having that peer support network, I think is huge. And I really hope that is that new ways are continuing to be found to engage that and allow people to network with other students, and even students that may be on different courses as well, and other university stakeholders.
Thank you very much, James. I guess the other thing that's very interesting that can't be replicated is how UHI's syllabus grows out of the places. Orkney is an archaeological lab, but nobody can invent an archaeological lab like Orkney. SAMS has been sitting on the edge of the ocean for a long time, working in the ocean. These things are really hard to replicate. So don't think we should over worry on this one. Another question, really interesting question, one that's a live question in UHI and has been, and this is the balance between local and partnership. And this question says, one of UHI's strengths is its close links to communities across the region. However, the dispersed model also brings a challenge of being a joined up organization that others can partner with. Do you agree? And if so, how can this be addressed? There's a cracker of a question. All right, we've got Charlotte, Lydia, and Todd. I'm not sure if I saw Flo or not, but we'll start off then with you, Charlotte.
Well, I was thinking about your reference to the tree analogy earlier, James, and the strength of the roots for the tree that is the UHI is absolutely about its dispersed model across the Highlands and Islands and its links to the communities. So it is absolutely fundamental. I totally recognise the challenge of how you then bring that back into a kind of corporate view. And I guess Highlands and Islands Enterprise as an organisation has that same challenge. But actually, Highlands and Islands is big in terms of territory, but it's small in terms of people and partnerships. And I think we already do a pretty good job of making sure that those dialogues take place at the right place, that UHI has a seat at national tables, at regional tables, but when it's doing that, it's bringing that perspective of its rootedness in local communities. So I think that makes it absolutely strong. And actually, let's face it, there are global businesses around the world whose footprint is a lot bigger than the Highlands and Islands and manage to make that work. It's down to us being able to make sure that we can communicate and have a set of core agreed priorities that are part of that common narrative.
Lydia, thanks, Charlotte.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with what Charlotte has said there. As a principal of a college with 10 centres distributed across half the size of Wales geographically, it poses a question, you know, within my own college. How do you actually achieve the best possible outcome across you know, dispersed centres? And within UHI, that is magnified across 74 current locations. I think it takes leadership, and it is a special leadership challenge in order to enable that local voice and that local place, but also to be able to take advantage of the being bigger than the sum of the parts of these individual areas, and actually to plan for the whole, but also benefit the local, and to be able to be attuned to the local, that also has a place within the regional planning. So it is a challenge, but I think, you know, we are well attuned to this challenge, and the future is about collaboration and leadership that will drive that collaboration to fruition.
Thank you. Todd, Lydia says it's a challenge to leadership. So over to you now, Todd.
There's lots of challenges to leadership. I'm just writing down that perhaps we rephrase the pillars of the tree as branches of the tree. I like the analogy in the way in which we're going with this one. Look, I may, James, thank you, and thank you for the question. I may have misunderstood the question, but perhaps the question is set up as if it's mutually exclusive, that you can't have these partnerships and be more outward thinking and engaged and be local at the same time. And I simply just do not agree. And we've just had 50 years of climate awareness and climate change and climate activism, which talks about thinking global but acting local. And I think a university like ours can do that. And if you remember, I did put up a slide that says we need to think about beyond our place-based education. I mean, there is a notion that, you know, we've got centres of excellence across the Highlands and Islands, and that's the only area I'm going to serve. In and around that, all of the businesses that you see of our size and enterprise are actually having partnerships and engaging more widely than the centres that they're in. And you've only got to look at the economic, you know, the city growth deals, you look at just all the economic development that's being encouraged by organisations like HI and by government and others, to see that you can actually think global, act local, and serve both. So in my view, they're not mutually exclusive, they're actually mutually beneficial.
Thank you very much. We're beginning to run out of time. Just a practical question. Where can stakeholders see the new strategic plan to comment on it?
I'm happy to answer that one. Early next week, we'll be launching a website which will be open both internally and external. We're about to start that consultation process internally and externally. So we'll be making announcements around the availability of that website. It won't be behind a firewall. It'll be in a position where folk can be able to make some contributions. And I just want to re-emphasise that this is a draft framework. We've got 2 months of discussion that will develop the strategic plan in toto.
Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you for the questions, and also thank you panelists for taking them up with such enthusiasm and gusto. We are now really at the end of our time. I hope that you've enjoyed this opener. There are more to come in the series, and the next one is Sturi and the Connachach Gorum, leading the blue economy. So I hope you'll all sign up and get more people to sign up to come back to hear about the blue economy. Meantime, thank you for your participation and thank you for your attendance. Thank you. Bye-bye.